So was your old man into all this as well then, was he?
Not real, like sort of
Photography.
hobby, but like not anything more than take it when you go for a drive down the coast type thing. But not like he certainly wasn't.
Yeah, my dad too. He had a camera and a bag and stuff like that. I guess like people might do that if they didn't have their phones these days. You know, they might have invested a little bit more into like capture the moment, but you needed that level. You couldn't just buy like a. Yeah, I wonder like phones have probably stopped people from being like amateur photographers because they can just capture something on their phone rather than invest in like something like that.
Maybe from the art of photography.
From the art of it, yeah.
But I think everyone's a photographer because of that.
Yeah.
Like everyone can go and take a photo, but yeah, the art of maybe it's changed. But yeah, no, it was a package. So you get like a little bag and it have the flash in it, and have 2 lenses in it, and then the camera. And, you know, spots for roll of films. Or whatever.
Yeah,
so it's like the first, like, it was like, you know, go off and take your photos. And
remember when we used to get the photos developed and they would come in the sleeve.
Paper sleeve.
And then they'd have the negatives in there as well. And like, you used to like kind of pull out the negatives.
You still do it. I've done a bit with that, with this exact
But where do
camera.
people like, because there is a bit of a renaissance in film as well though, like, because I've seen like, I don't know, I think it's Kodak are doing like thanks man.
Yeah, thanks mate.
Yeah, Kodak are doing like a film camera now as
they're
well.
Super 8.
Super 8.
Yeah. Which is cool. And you can take it, you do it. You go to a camera store. So like for Melbourne, if you go to Michael's in the city.
They develop for you.
Yeah, you go in there and they have a big area. You know, back like the old day where you go to the chemist and you drop it off at the little thing. The same. Sort of feels the same as you go there, you drop it off and they, you know, you write down on your little slip, what do you want? How many do you want? What sizes? What colors?
I remember a mate of mine got a visit from the cops because he handed his photos into Boots, the chemist, which was where you used to hand them in. And he had like somebody where he was at had like a plant, like a weed plant growing in the background, and some fucking grass in Boots has got, because they had to check every, because you know, like you used to like overexposure weather, so whoever it was checking every photos. They saw this plant, phoned the cops, and so my mate went to pick up his things, and then like a day later he got like a knock on the door from Edinburgh's finest. Like,
well, that'll learn you. Don't take a photo.
Like snitches in Boots. Like,
that is funny as. Oh, very good. All right, let's get into it. Hey,
cool, man.
Thanks for coming along, Richie. We can talk all things brand, marketing, communications, et cetera, et cetera. I want to start in I guess probably an area that you would need to talk about a fair bit in the initial stages of brand strategy, in around sort of like trends and identifying trends. And so for starters, how difficult is it to talk to a client about trends in general?
I mean, I think it probably would be quite difficult because it depends on what they're asking for from this trend, or like what they're looking for you to bring to life based off the back of that trend. You get different trends, I suppose, like kind of social and cultural trends. And then you get kind of trends within branding and within marketing to a degree. Certainly within design, there would be like some level of trends. Generally, if a client's coming saying like, we want this kind of thing, it might be a bit of a worry because they've already got like a kind of predisposed idea in their head about what it is they're after. And sometimes that can be suitable for what they want, whether it's like a style of content they're creating or a certain, I don't know, trend that they're flipping off the back of that's moving. But I don't know. I don't really like get my clients talking to me much about trends because, I mean, trends come and go, I suppose, like by definition. So if you're looking to do a strategy project for your brand or to reposition your brand, you really want to be looking like at least like kind of 5+ years ahead. You don't want something to come out and then everybody in 6 months later to have gone like, they're trying to do, you know, that thing, whatever it is, like.
So I guess that's sort of why I asked that question, is because I think when people think of brand, they think of visual identity for the most part anyway. And that visual identity is, hey, I saw this cool thing. That's what I want my brand to look like. That having that opinion coming into that session, I feel like that would be detrimental to what you're trying to.
Probably. Yeah. Probably would. I think that people do see visual identity as the kind of end game of brand a lot. a lot of times they kind of like boil it down to how they look, the logo, whatever like that, which is true to a degree. But I always describe brands as the sum of the perceptions that are held about you. And branding is anything that you do that can alter those perceptions. So yeah, of course, like the way that you look and the way that people draw perceptions based on how you look is one of those indicators of a brand. But there's so many different other ones as well. You know, it's also the story and the message that you have. It's the kind of products that you design. It's the services that you offer. It's the people that you hire. It's the way you answer the phone. It's the culture of your team. So brand to me is a lot more expansive and more detailed and covers a lot more touch points than just the visual identity. But yeah, it makes sense to me. You know, like people absorb visual stuff so quickly. It's something like 6,000 or 60,000 times faster than written content. So it makes sense that, you know, the most logical thing for people to do is to think like, I want to be perceived in a certain way. Therefore, my visual, like the way that I visually express my brand, needs to be the most important thing that I focus on. But luckily for me, I don't do any of the visual stuff. So when I'm having conversations with them, we don't have to drop into conversations about visuals or logos or type or color or anything like that. It's kind of further upstream.
And so your strategy is really integral to developing that brand language, right? Like it's that starting point for all of the stuff you just mentioned, right?
Definitely the language part. Yeah, definitely the language part. Because a lot of the times when clients come to me, they don't really have, or they feel they don't really have a story to their brand. Maybe they never had one in the first place. You know, maybe they were like getting their business up and running and they just kind of went with something while they were trying to get the business up and going, and then they get common situation. They get like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years down the road, they've grown, they've been successful, and they look at their brand and they're actually like, what is our story? What are we in the market? Maybe things have changed. Maybe other competitors have come in. So a big part of what I do is to kind of help them work out what perceptions they want to create in the minds of the people that they want to speak to, and then create a story that gives them a compelling way to express what they're about that people actually kind of find interesting. A lot of the times I feel like brands get drawn into or fall into the trap of just literally talking about themselves too much. You know, we are this, we do that, we're stronger, we're faster, we're better, we're easier, we're simpler, we're more experienced. But sometimes you've got to ask, like, well, why would people care about that element of your brand? What does it mean for them? So, and people engage with stories. They always had, you know, the way that stuff has been passed down over time, over the years, has been through storytelling. You know, sometimes when I'm thinking about like expressing something, or when you think about what is meaningful or what's effective for relaying communication, it's when you just start to tell something that's happened to you. You know, I remember when, or does anybody, do you know when this happens? Like you kind of like you take people back to a time that they can visualize, or a situation that can visualize by telling a story. It's just like a common pattern, I suppose, of like how people can remember things, can see themselves in things, and like, yeah, it makes it more interesting. Story has got to be like key to positioning the brand, I reckon.
Do you think that people get caught up in the idea of like their elevator pitch? Because often the elevator pitch is the product offering, that we do it better than everyone else because of XYZ and for this price type scenario.
Yeah.
Do you think that sort of clashes with what you're talking about?
No, not really. I mean, I think the elevator pitch is super important because you don't have a lot of time to. It's just about being condensed as well, isn't it? It's about being concise and being condensed, and everybody wants that thing that. Like when you're in that situation where you want to communicate what you're about quickly, you can't start reeling off this big, you know, manuscript or this big like full chapters about, well, you know, it started in 1977. You need like a really concise, memorable, concise and kind of short version of a way to describe what you're about. So yeah, a lot of the work that I do is about giving them that little like bit, you know. And I find that there's two important parts to that. when you're looking for an elevator pitch, the first is you've got to kind of nail the description of the business or the service. And that can come down to just picking the right words to describe what your business is or what your organization is about. But then so that people can position you ahead, all right, they are a film production company. They are a insurance underwriting agency. They are a technology company. But after that, to have an elevator pitch, you've got to kind of like just give the little first inklings of the story, like just to plant the seeds of what a story is. So you've got to bring in this little like bit into the second part of that elevator pitch that gives you the definition of what your business is and then hints at the story about why that might be interesting to those people. I always heard this thing about like how Steven Spielberg's films could be written on a Post-it note. And so it was like lost alien, boy helps lost alien find his way back home, which is E.T., or dinosaurs get recreated on an island. Like, you know, like he can condense it down to this one little line, and you're like, shit, that sounds like a
yeah, that's a good movie.
Get the popcorn.
Yeah. So following on from that, and you mentioned earlier about, you know, you're sort of looking 5 years ahead in the way that you think about telling the story and what their story needs to represent. So is there a bit of crossover with like futurism? Like, do you need to really consider what the market might look like in the future? Or is it really just internally what they're facing and how they need to shape themselves?
I mean, I think it's more the present moment, to be honest. You know, you can start to try to predict like where their business or their industry or their people might want to take this in like 5 years or in the future. But then that might mean that you actually miss defining what they're about at this current point.
Bit of a balancing act then.
Bit of a balancing act, maybe. Yeah, like give them something that is, I mean, you want to have something that's kind of aspirational as well. And often when I'm doing like kind of narratives or positioning for brands, you need to like throw the flag ahead, like throw the stake in the flag ahead, because nobody wants a definition of their brand or a positioning for their brand that is just kind of like slightly mundane, you know, like slightly kind of non-aspirational. Like you really want to kind of push them to kind of like see themselves in a place where they potentially aren't, but at the same breath, you don't want to like turn them into something or suggest that they present themselves as something that might be relevant for 5 years down the line, because you never quite know. I often think that like when I'm doing strategies for brands and businesses and organizations, it's not so much about painting them in a way that that is unrealistic, that they can kind of move themselves into. A lot of it is honestly just like holding up to a mirror to what they are about at the moment, but defining it in a way that is interesting to the people they want to speak to, whether that's like their internal team or their external team. So, you know, I do a lot of stuff often I do stuff around like defining the brand internally so that the team can kind of be galvanized around these like common attributes or behaviors. Some people might call them values that guide and instruct people on what they're about and what they're about. And when you're doing those values, you don't want to come up with something that isn't true to them. So if you say like, oh, you know, we're groundbreaking and we push boundaries and we move fast until we break it. If their team isn't like that or the business owners aren't like that, don't try to suggest that they are. A lot of the time when I'm doing values or I'm doing those kind of like things that make that business special, I just pull them straight from the stuff that already exists in them. You know, like the little nuanced things that they do, the stuff that they that they pay attention to. I just take that little insight, tell it in a way that's kind of cool and interesting and appealing for people to get behind, and then reflect it back to them. So I think a lot of the time it's just about being a mirror, just like understanding what a business is about or what an organization is about, and just kind of relaying it back to them. And then they go like, yeah, that is it. Like that's what we've been trying to get to, but we haven't been able to nail it.
So how do you balance the ego of I want to be this, or like you were describing, we're fast paced and we're action and we're this and we're this. How do you pull them back to that?
I mean, if I I just try to make it about their audiences, not about general, because ego generally comes from like kind of one person, or maybe like it's one person like filtered down into a couple of people. But if I was working with a brand or a business and they're like, you know, we're about this and we should stand for this, and I mean, I'll never dismiss it, because you know they're the people that are closest to it. And like I said, sometimes you want to hold up a mirror, and if that is what they're believing, and the motivations and the kind of direction that they want to put behind their brand and how they're positioned, then you know I'm not going to stand in their way. But I take the time to speak to a lot, to try to understand who it is this brand needs to appeal to. You know, like who are their audiences? Where are they? What do they care about? What does this brand want those audiences to do? And is this instruction from this ego person about what their brand is, does that actually match up? So often if I come up, or I kind of lock heads, or not that I lock heads, but if I come up against something that I'm hearing that I don't think is true or should be part of their story, I just try to relay it back to the audience and be like, no, we've spoken to these people. They've told us this about your brand, or about the product, or about the service. Let's match what they want. Let's match what they care about. Let's finding something that will resonate with them. And as soon as you can kind of bring it round to that way of thinking, which generally you tie it into the bottom line, like, you know, if we resonate with them, then they're going to buy your product, or sign up, or send their kid to your school or whatever. So I just use that. I like bring it back to the audience, bring it back to the bottom line. And like generally like that's the way that you kind of like combat ego or misconceptions, rather than saying, no, I don't agree with you. It doesn't really matter what either of us think, you know, the client or the strategist or the designer or whatever. It's about the people that you're trying to create for.
So how do you marry up, or at least what are some of the sort of techniques that you can use to connect that brand or that brand vision with consumer behavior, and how they might interact with the product or features moving forward?
I would just like spend as much time as you can like with the audience that you're creating for. So as part of the research phase that I do a lot of the typical stuff that anybody might do when they're trying to create a strategy. You know, it's the diagnosis thing, it's the audits and the competitor analysis and the industry analysis and data analysis and all that kind of stuff. But really for me, the most valuable stuff, that's all good to kind of fill your brain up with the knowledge you need. But interviews with team members, or with current clients or customers, or prospective clients or customers, they're the most valuable times. Like they're the times that you can actually have a conversation, get the insight. And so once you kind of have an understanding about what kind of person you're trying to create this brand for and what they care about, then it's much more easy to be like, right, now I see what they are wanting or needing or bothered about or motivated by. And then you just like kind of match up what your suggestions are for how that brand slots in to kind of like have a role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you encountered, like, I mean, I know working in agency, it doesn't always go perfect, you know, A to Z. But have you had any situations where there has been the perfect client, there has been the sort of perfect brand delivery, research has gone well, the communication with the client's gone well? Like, have you had a perfect...
Yeah, all of them, man.
Yeah. You big liar.
No. I mean, I did, like when I was a creative director working in agencies, I'm an independent. So, you know, I have probably like more choice over the clients that I have got more choice over the clients I use. But when you're working in agencies, you know, you potentially don't have that luxury. So you're needing to work with people that have different triggers, care about different things, are nice to work with, are more problematic to work with. But I always used to be like, when I was a creative director, I used to like really focus on first time sign off. You know, I didn't want the work to come back. Like I wanted to like work super hard on a brand concept or a campaign presentation or a digital interface presentation or whatever. Maybe digital a bit different because it's a bit more iterative, but I I used to want to walk out of there with them going like, we love it, like no changes. But and I'd be annoyed, I'd be disappointed if they were like, yeah, we like this, but we want to change this. It's like, well, what does that mean? That means you've either like not sold it in well enough or you've missed the mark in terms of like what it needs to be. But I mean, again, it goes to that point, really. You're not trying to get them to kind of say that they like it. You're trying to get them to say that they see why it's valuable for the people that you're creating for, their customers or their clients. But yeah, it doesn't always work. Generally, I find that if you have a big presentation and it doesn't fly, you're just kind of screwed from, you're on the back foot. Trust in you from them kind of drops down.
Sure.
And you can go say, okay, we missed the mark, we'll come away and we'll have another shot at it. But yeah, I worked for this like architecture firm once, and the work was not like the first time round. And then we did like 2 or 3 iterations after that. And then eventually they were just like, nah, it's not working.
Yeah, just didn't get there.
Didn't get it. But I think like the first one that we did was where it was lost. So yeah, I've had stuff that's been, not bad, but generally the focus has been on like getting them to love it and getting them to see why it will work for them.
Do you think that those losses can be in just like a difference of taste? Like, is it as simple as that? Is it just that like, I'm not feeling this?
I mean, it can be, but again, like why, like they just need to see it working for their audience.
Sure. Yeah.
So sometimes you might have missed what they see as their audience, which means you haven't really done enough on the research and the strategy point of view. The other thing that I think is important to do is just, I mean, I know people are, they have a kind of mistrust of this big kind of reveal. A lot of agencies would be like, we don't have a big ta-da moment. We don't have a reveal. We work iteratively. We're all showing stuff. And I think that can work well in certain situations. But I also know that like clients or, certain projects or clients, they can't see far enough ahead, or they don't want to. They want you to go away and bring back the work, the ideas, show me the finished thing, and then blow them away, and they love it. And I love when that happens.
So you think you work best when it's like the keys are handed over? It's like, here you go and do the thing for us.
To a degree.
We trust you.
Yeah, to a degree. Because like, I if I was to say to my, if I was to go to like a law firm and say, I want you to write me a will, I don't want them to be like constantly coming back to me, kind of like, should it be this? We're going to try. I just want them to come back. And also, I don't want 3 versions of the will and like for me to pick. I want like one version that they believe is the best version, and for me to kind of trust them because I've already built up. So that's another reason I don't agree in like multiple concept designs of brand identity stuff. I just feel like there's one good concept. The other 2 are like sad little versions of
That's interesting, because when we pitch, we'll do, usually it's 2, 3, maybe 4
treatments, you would call it.
Well, like sort of create a really high level creative concept, like almost summarized in the title of whatever the concept is, as hey, do you want to work on this? So we'll know that they're working on a specific campaign, and we already know what their audience is. We know what product they're marketing or whatever it is. This is just the sort of, do you want to go in this creative direction or this creative direction or this creative direction? And we'll often sort of pitch it in a way that's like, we know which one they're going to pick.
Yeah.
But the other ones are almost there as we could do these 2. Like, we do all of them. We know this is the good one. We know this is the one that's going to land. But these ones, like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing them as well. It's almost like a bit of an add-on type. I guess that's a little bit different because it's less, there's less in it, right? There's less guts. It's just like an idea as opposed to like a full.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. Yeah. And like, I do think like, I wouldn't present like kind of finished concepts of a brand identity. But I do think that doing, like doing kind of concept territories where you don't do any design work, but you do pull in references and visuals and kind of like have that discussion, that's perfectly fine to do, because you're not kind of like going down you're not going down that line of doing all this work. But yeah, you're right. So yeah, like present like options and varieties for discussion and involvement. But there's always one good idea. So I'm always like, let's not. Plus, I always think like there's one, like an identity should be based on the strategy. So the identity should create the perceptions that the strategy has identified need to be created for this brand. So how different can they be? How different should these concepts be? Because if one of them creates this perception and one of them creates this other perception, because it's like completely different style, it's like, well, this one's wrong strategically. It's wrong. So it's not just like another option. And then the other kind of issue is that sometimes you get like a Frankenstein. Yeah, people going like, yeah, we really like the way that this brand works here with this photography, but we actually prefer the logo from that, and then we actually like the type from that. Like I say, I don't work in design, and I've never have. Well, I have been as a creative director, but I've never been a designer. But yeah, I would always be wary of like kind of presenting things for them to choose when really you should be the expert saying like, this is what we recommend.
Yeah.
But if you want a stepping stone to get to that point, territories, treatments, suggestions of concepts, like just don't go the full 3 fully created concept designs for identities. Just one of them's good, not 3 of them.
Yeah, I've been involved in enough sort of brand identity delivery that like mood boards are the best, right?
Yeah.
Like you deliver here are the 3 concepts, and as far as I've taken it is I've given you 3 mood boards. I haven't done any actual work, but like here is essentially the look or the style. You can see the elements here. You can see, and I think if the Frankenstein thing comes out of that, that's okay, because then that just gives you a new mood board to
it
start
just gives
with,
you
right?
a kind of new direction.
Yeah, but if it's at the tail end, that's when it's like, well, that's not really how it works. I mean, you can, but it's just not going to be effective. Right?
It wouldn't. I mean, on the work that I produce, like there is no kind of multiple concepts. Luckily for me,
because it's research based, right? Like here is what the research suggests, and this is the strategy we should take forward.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's like a presentation of like here's a research. Here's what our customers or our audiences are telling us. Here's what I think that means. Here's a bunch of recommendations based on those meanings. That would be the thinking side of things. And then from the writing side of things, when you're crafting a narrative, it's like, here's the narrative. Like, here's our positioning statement. Here's like a shortened version. Here's our line. Here's the one line. Here's our manifesto. Here's the way that we talk and describe ourselves. And here's our voice that we put out. Like, I don't go like, here's 3 versions of all of that stuff and let's pick one.
Yeah, because it should only be one.
Should only be one. Yeah, it should only be one. I mean, sometimes, there's some words and stuff in there that people are like, oh, we're not quite happy with this. But generally, like, if you've done it right and you present it right and you've done the research and you've stepped people through the process, like, or one thing I always do is to propose the position of a brand before I actually go ahead and create the narrative for it. I'm saying like, we should build the story of this brand around connection or something. Then you have a discussion with like the client and the team, and you're like, yeah, we're on board with that because it makes sense because of the research and the positioning and the competitors and stuff. Then you go away. So that what you're coming back with is strategically correct, but they might just have some kind of, I don't know, feedback on word choice or tone or length of copy or wording or whatever like that.
Yeah. And so you recently found a bit of a niche in that there's an upskill opportunity for people who work in brand, who work in design or comms or whatever, to sort of, be more present and understanding what brand can do for their business and how they can influence that. So tell me about the courses that you've been running.
Yeah. So I've always taught workshops. I started like years and years ago when I was doing because we did a lot of website projects and digital projects. I did a course that was a lunchtime course in Melbourne, like in person in Melbourne. It was called How to Make Great Websites in 60 Minutes. Like it was because it was an hour course. And after I did that first one, I had this guy like write into the business that we did it through and say like, because he was disappointed that he never left having created a great website in 60 minutes.
Right.
I was like, no, man, it's not like, how to make macaroni and cheese in 45 minutes. It's like 60 minutes of making great websites. Yeah. But I'd always taught course, little mini workshops on digital project management, digital strategy, brand, how to run a damn good brand project. And then 2003, I put together like a longer form, because obviously like this was when like remote online learning had come. People were a lot more comfortable with it because of lockdowns and stuff. So I was like, I'm going to take the stuff that I have delivered about brand and brand strategy, which was kind of like a 2-hour workshop. It was like heavily crammed like into 2 hours, and people enjoyed it, but they were always like, it was quite packed full of content. Maybe you could pace it out. So then I started to kind of just think like, right, I'm going to take the whole process of a brand strategy project and the role of a brand strategist and how I do it, everything from like pitching it, selling it, writing, positioning, frameworks, running and designing workshops. I'm going to turn that into an online course. So it was called I called it Bear Brand Strat. And the idea was there's a lot of fluff and nonsense sometimes around strategy and brand strategy. Everybody talking about, what was it I saw once? It was like, if your brand is the universe, then strategy is like the theory of life or something like that. It was just like stuff like that, like it's just like nonsense. And everybody talking about all the words like essence and pillars and North Stars and all that. But there's a lot to talk about, but not a lot of stuff where it's actually like, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
So Bear Brand Strat, I was like, let's just strip it back so that it's bare, and be very open and transparent about the realities of like doing brand strategy within like a new brand or a rebrand project. Sharing all the processes, sharing the work that I do, giving people like practical, I can actually like pick this up, take it away and apply it to what I'm doing in my business or agency. So yeah, it's a 4-week course that covers the full gamut of a brand strategy process. A live course, not like an on-demand course. I know you get a lot of like on-demand courses where you kind of absorb the content in your own time, but these are running as like kind of cohorts. So it's like, we announce the cohort, people sign up, they do the 4-week thing with me talking to them. We have 4 workshops running on the Thursdays for 2 hours. And then on the Tuesdays in between those workshops, we have like a live Q&A session where people can discuss it. So yeah, I just felt like people were keen. People were up for learning about brand strategy. I think as designers and creatives, being able to have a strategy to the work that they produce makes it more informed. For sure. It makes it easier for them to kind of get sign off on it because it removes that subjectivity because it's based on a strategy. And it allows them to go deeper into a project. Plus it puts them further upstream. There's just so many benefits for creatives and designers to be able to kind of like do and sell brand strategy into their client base that I was like, I reckon people will be up for it. And they seem to like it.
Yeah, because you can see that like with technology advancements, like the design aspect is so much easier than it ever has been. It's only going to get easier and easier, right? So, but that doesn't mean that the way in which you communicate that design or the way in which you get to knowing what the design should be has necessarily become any easier. It is in that it's easier for us to communicate, and you can jump on ChatGPT and say, give me 4 brand values in regards to this as a whatever, as a very totally basic type thing. But that's not new information. That's just regurgitated in some new puzzle piece. So yeah, I mean, I can certainly see how that is of huge value to people that, and maybe not necessarily in brand, but brand adjacent or marketing and comms, being able to communicate their brand better or being able to contribute to that as the business grows. I think that would be hugely valuable.
Yeah, there's always this thing of like, I think that you want to be the head and not the hands. You don't want to be stuck downstream talking about like tactics. You do at some point, but only once you've like worked out what those tactics need to be and then worked out why those tactics need to be that way. And you do that by like kind of diagnosing it. There's an analogy that somebody makes about like, like strategy and where the word strategy comes from. And it's from like strategos. I'm pretty sure it was Ritson actually that said this. So Mark Ritson, and he talks about like, strategos being derived from like the word for general, I think it was in ancient Greek. And so the generals would, when they're having a war, they'd be like, they wouldn't just like kind of, they go to the place where this war was happening. They'd scope out their area. So they'd check out like what the land was like, what armor they had, what armor the enemy had. Then they take all that knowledge, go into their little tent, come up with what the strategy was, right? We're going to go in here and run over this way. Then we'll chuck the spears or whatever from this way, archers over the top. That's the strategy. And then on the day they'd execute, which is the tactics. And it's like, imagine going into war, having done no diagnosis or no strategy. You just like rock up on the day and be like, come on, everyone, over the top.
Yeah,
just like get annihilated.
Yeah.
So anytime that I have a client who's kind of dubious about whether or not to do the strategy, I'm like, would you actually want to take your business into the next 5 years blind? Like essentially blind to what's going on, what equipment you've got, what tools you've got at your disposal. Why would you possibly do that? And once they see the madness of going into war without knowing anything about the battle, then they kind of sometimes they come around it. It's a slightly more, it's a metaphor that they see.
Yeah, I love that. I love that metaphor. Yeah. And also it's circling all the way back to what you're talking about with like using story. Like that story you tell then, you're like, oh, I can immediately understand why doing strategy is important because
that's why, man. It's like, when you're trying to get a point across, storytelling and allowing I suppose it's the visualization,
be able to connect to the visual. Yeah.
But I mean, in the work that you do, like, you kind of have to come up with this, because the story, the visuals are obviously not enough. Of course. You have to have that kind of like narrative and story running through it.
Well, similar to like I was suggesting with the sort of design being easier and easier to create, the actual visuals of photo and video are easier and easier to create.
They can be done.
Yeah. It can be done by you pull your phone up and you record a thing and it's close enough. Right? Of course if the strategy, if the intent is that you want it to be really premium, well, you're going to use more expensive gear and you're going to have all the lighting equipment and all the rest, but that's not the expectation. That's an outcome of whatever the strategy is. So in the same way, absolutely, you really need to consider all of that facet, all of the how you want people to react with the content, how you need them to feel once they've watched the content, how do you need them to feel at certain moments within the content, what's the story you're trying to convey, and then ultimately you take it then a step beyond that, and it's very metrics based. It's what are you trying to sell? Have you sold enough of it?
That's true.
Are you communicating your call to action in a way that is going to get people to click the thing? And it almost, you start with this very emotive approach and you almost end in this like the antithesis of is that it's like
way more direct.
Yeah. And it's like, are you getting this exact thing? This is the metric we're trying to measure. How are we getting that thing? And like the emotion is sort of the context for the conversation, but it's not the conversation.
Yeah.
You sort of have to be able to separate them, which is why it's really important for there to be multiple voices and multiple people in those projects that have different skill sets. Having somebody who's, as a storyteller, communicator, somebody who is sort of technically proficient and can create, and then they can understand the effort that it would take to create something. And then the tail end of it, somebody who's very sort of digital focused, assuming that you're doing a digital campaign, of course. Somebody that's going to understand, do all of these things that we've just talked about, are they actually going to result in any sort of outcome?
Yeah. Yeah, you want the outcome. I mean, like, I always say that, like, I always talk about brand being about perception, but it's not just about perception. It's about perception and persuasion as well.
Yeah.
You need to create the story, but you can't just create the story and then just walk away going, cool story, bro. And then they just like disappear into the distance. You need to get them to perceive you in a certain way so that they will then buy, sign up, vote, like whatever it is that you want them to do. You got to use the story to create the perceptions that you want and to kind of like give them that narrative that allows you to kind of like resonate with them in an engaging way through storytelling. But don't for a minute think that you're just there to like not do anything. I think you fail, like from a communication point of view, if you don't like kind of get the intended outcome, which could be just, it could just be like to kind of, like trying to change perceptions, but ultimately there is a persuasion element to it as well. Yeah.
And I think sort of you're in a position where you almost need to sort of persuade the internal team or the leadership team first. And then it's that then flows on through their internal team, and then that develops into however the business sort of moves forward, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like if you don't have the if you don't have buy-in, like I work with, I'd say like not massive global. I don't work with massive global brands. Like I don't work with like, your kind of like known kind of global brands. I work with like, I'd say small to medium-sized businesses and organizations, maybe like up to like 200-300 people or something, maybe like national, but some international. So the leadership of that brand, if they're not into it and they don't kind of buy into it and
have a huge impact,
help you kind of run with it, if they're not convinced by it, you could walk away and then the next day the whole thing would just kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting them on board and like getting them to kind of see their brand in the way that you're trying to kind of mold it and position it for them. Yeah, it's key, or else you're just gonna kind of walk away and they're not gonna be into it. They're not gonna like kind of run with it, pedal it, make it part of their business and organization, and it just won't work.
Which they need to, because it's their business.
Yeah, like no one else is going to do it for them, right? It's like no one else is going to kind of like help reposition their brand. It needs to come from the top, and especially like, sometimes people view branding as like, the domain or the role or the responsibility of like the marketing department, but everything that you do as a brand has a perception, like it creates a perception of it. And if you're like a buyer or a customer, like you don't know whether or not like the way that you experience like a difficult shopping process or an abandoned cart, like that's annoying. That wasn't necessarily created by the marketing team, more like the product team or the digital team or whatever, but that's a perception of the brand. You'd be like, oh, that brand's got such an annoying, like useless shopping experience. That's going to form the perception. So yeah, it's got to come from internal at the top, because if it doesn't, then it's not going to go into all of the areas, and then all of the areas aren't going to put the same effort into all of their touch points that they create of the brand to really like firm up the perceptions that you're wanting to create for it.
Yeah, no, I hear. Richie, I have a bit of a game for us to play.
Oh yeah, cool. I'm into games.
It's a quick one. We've tried a few games.
Is it gambling?
It should be. There'll be some guessing involved. We have been playing a game called Brands with Brander.
Brands with Brander.
Yeah. Which the other guy, it doesn't quite work when the other guys host, but but all of the sounds, I was going to be like, guess the jingle.
Okay.
All of the ones I put together were from sort of the 90s and 2000s in Australia, like TVCs in Australia. I was like, it's probably not right for so you're probably not going to guess any of those. Anyway, so we've got a new game. You'll be the first person to cop this game, and we're calling it Speed Dating.
Right.
And I'm going to just rattle off a couple of things. I want you to guess the date or the era or the decade that this was popular.
Okay.
And when you think it might have like had its peak
right.
when it was a thing.
Just the decade or like the year?
Year if you can get it.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I've got a little bit of tidbit of information at the end of it. So
okay.
We'll see. So
all right.
I've only got 3, so we'll see how it goes. If it's lame, cut it out.
Okay.
So first up, I'm going to list the 3. Give me a off top of the dome quick response.
Yeah.
So the first one is the selfie.
The selfie. 2010s.
It's a good guess. Cinematic universe.
Cinematic universe. What's that?
Like Marvel.
Yeah. That. Oh man, that's like, 2000s.
And lastly, the papyrus font.
No idea. I don't know anything about fonts. Like, it's got to be old. 1970s.
It's a good guess too. Yeah, it's not bad. So I'll start from the top. So the selfie, first ever selfie.
The first ever selfie.
Well, I just thought I'd give you a little tidbit of information to go with.
Some Roman, like, you mean
1839.
Like the first ever 1839?
Yeah, crazy. So it was by this American photographer called Robert Cornelius.
Yeah.
He built a makeshift camera, put it in his front yard, and he had to stand in front of the camera for 10 minutes for it to be able to expose and take the thing.
10 minutes of doing a selfie. Like,
yeah, we'll chuck it up on screen because it's pretty cool. That
10 milliseconds.
It had to be super still because any sort of movement.
You just go all blurred, mate.
Yeah, crazy.
Did he post it on Instagram or something like that?
Yeah, 1839. Yeah,
it's me.
But there was a bit of sort of the 70s, 80s in China Korea, Japan, where Polaroids were really popular. And
like
that was-
printed, like
Yeah,
print out.
yeah, exactly.
You know,
So that was
I
like
learned this thing the other day. Like, you know how everybody thinks that you should like
Shake
it.
yeah.
Apparently, you're not supposed to do that.
it's just-
like,
yeah, no,
so weird.
yeah,
why
yeah.
why does everybody like think that you print it out and then you sit there and go?
Because
Like
they're
that?
the Black Eyed Peas song, isn't that the?
Is it? Is that where it comes
shake
from?
Shake,
Oh,
shake.
shake it off.
But I think the 2003 was the start of the selfie. when it was like a thing,
2003.
because that was when the Sony Ericsson Z1010 was released. It was the first mobile with a front-facing camera.
Yeah, I mean, I did think that. Obviously, like, I mean, I meant but then I thought, like, why would people take selfies if they didn't? I mean, I thought people would take selfies so to post it somewhere.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking, like, right, so it has to be the dawn of like Instagram,
Like 2010-ish.
which was 2010-ish, no?
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, like, yeah,
It might well be. Maybe that was when it was at its peak popularity.
selfie, peak popularity,
like
now.
Instagram sort of
Yeah.
era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my initial, my first ever Instagram post is like a selfie of me like proper hungover, just like hanging off at the end of my bed or so. I should probably delete that.
Digital footprint.
Well, do you remember how like everybody's first Instagram ones are like with the frame? Like with the white frame around it.
Some sort of shitty
I'm pretty sure it's
overlay.
that. So I'm just going to keep it for nostalgia's sake.
The next one with the cinematic universe. So 2008 was the start of Marvel.
Right.
That's probably peak popularity. But interestingly, the first one was Universal's Monsters, which was in like the 1930s through 50s. So movies like Frankenstein's Monster, Dracula, Wolfman.
Right. So we're
These
defining
were all-
that as the era of like.
That was the first cinematic, because they were all in each other's movies. They
yeah, but
were all-
Frankenstein isn't a superhero though, no?
No. But cinematic universe, just
Cinematic
being that it's
universe,
like a
like-
universe where they all exist in the same.
I
Yeah,
see what you mean.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
A
And
cinematic
then-
universe, like so like a story, a narrative where there's characters that exist in a
Intertwine.
yeah.
The other one being like Godzilla through like the 50s to 70s.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Godzilla movies where different characters appear.
What about that one though, where they had like this like Sandman and the Silver Surfer and all of that kind of stuff? Is that not like
Fantastic Four?
Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
I think that's all Marvel
Is
still.
that Captain
Yeah.
America? Like so, yeah,
That's
was
all Marvel, yeah.
right.
Yeah. But different, I think, yeah. I mean, the complexities of it, I think different universes and whatever.
Different
but yeah,
universes.
yeah.
So what are we saying? 1930s.
1930s was the first. I mean, you'd have to look at the stats, I guess, of what was more popular in
Right.
terms of people going to watch the movies. But I would think that would be pretty popular going to the cinema in the 30s through 50s to watch Dracula, Frankenstein's Monster.
Yeah, it's
Wolfman.
not like you got Netflix to watch it on.
No, that's right. That's right. And then lastly, the papyrus font. I knew this one would stumble you, but 1982,
82. Well, I said 70s, didn't I?
70s,
Yeah.
by a guy, Chris Costello. He wrote it thinking about how English could have been written 2,000 years ago.
Right.
That was his own brief to himself, and then he sold the rights to it for $750.
Really?
Yeah, and then it was on.
There's so
Microsoft
much
and Apple
hate
and
for
whatever.
it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like within like
Yeah,
why
isn't it?
why is I've never understood why people like, because there's loads of fonts out there that are
Yeah,
like
Comic
kinda
Sans is another one
typefaces
that
are
people
like
hate.
people hate Comic
Yeah.
Sans. Like
I think it's just like social consensus, right? Like everyone just jumps on a bandwagon
Yeah,
and
everyone's
says,
like,
"Oh,
it's
I
crap."
also hate that." Yeah,
ready for the Renaissance. Then like
Yeah.
somebody's gonna bring it back. Wasn't there a film that used it? Wasn't it like
Avatar?
Avatar
2009,
used
yeah.
it? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and then
remember like
SNL
losing their shit over
SNL
that.
did a bit of skit on it with Ryan Gosling,
Right.
where it was like tracking down the creator of the designer of the
beat 'em up
Avatar
or
logo,
something,
being
like-
like, "That's just the papyrus font."
Oh, really?
That was I think just a social consensus of people like everyone loves to hate things.
yeah.
If we all hate it together.
Yeah,
you know?
typeface. I mean, I like a good looking typeface, but I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know them very well. I guess like if you're really into design, you study design, then that's people like pour over them, which is fine. You know, I pour over the words, not the typeface. I suppose. Like,
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, it's a super important distinction between you don't necessarily care how it looks at the end.
well, no. I definitely care how it looks at the end. Like,
I mean, in terms of like there's a line drawn, right? Like you get to a point and then you care.
I would care that like it creates the right perceptions that the strategy has identified.
I mean, I guess, sorry, just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that you don't care what it looks like, but your process isn't taking into account what it looks like from the beginning.
No,
right? Like it's that's not the ultimate
It's like, no. That, like, I'm not kind of visualizing anything for it. It's just like the business thinking side of things, structure, culture, services, positioning, all of that, and then story and narrative, and then it goes off to an internal design team or a design agency. Often I'll try to make sure that I bring in an agency that I know will do good work, or a studio that I'll do good work. But that's not always possible, you know. Sometimes they don't even. Sometimes that doesn't happen. But I try to make sure that it goes to somebody that I know is going to do a good job executing it.
Yeah. So I think final sort of stuff that I want to touch on, we briefly did earlier, is around the sort of the rise of AI in that sort of brand and visual sort of space. Do you think that there's just going to be an increase in that sort of human connection to brands, in that I mean, not to sort of put words in your mouth, but from my perspective, I feel very much like it's just going to be so accessible that we're just going to be so inundated with, you know, new design, new visuals, new videos, new content all the time. Like we already are, but just to another level again. I feel like the natural step beyond that is that the human connection, the human aspect, the what humans actually think about stuff would be more important. Like that would be the way that you would cut through the fat of the quantity of shit.
Yeah. So what, like you're saying, like what does quality look like when the quality is there and the volume,
at the click of a button, right?
Of it is up there. Yeah, I mean, I just get whenever I see anything that's generated by AI at the moment, it doesn't interest me at all. I flick straight through it deliberately because I guess I should be talking about the baseline where we are at the moment. You know, that's super kind of I don't know what you'd call it. I mean, you just call it an AI generated style, super smooth, slick, weird looking.
You can tell it.
Yeah, you can tell it.
Yeah.
Anytime I can tell, boom. I'm I don't care. I'm not I'm actually deliberately turned off by it because I feel encroached by that volume, and I know that there's been little. I feel like it's late. I feel like at the moment, if it's of that level of bog standard quality, it's lazy. I had my first LinkedIn beef with this rando the other day.
Yeah,
I don't
tell me
get
more.
involved in LinkedIn beef much, but he posted this a couple of images, 4 or 5 images or something, and he's the designers, you are on notice. That's what he kind of put. Designers, you are on notice. You know, you can produce this level of design work in minutes that would take design agencies and studios weeks, right? And I'm not joking. The stuff that he put up, the post that he put up, one of them was a kind of a mock-up of a brochure, or looked like a PowerPoint brochure that was crap, that had spelling mistakes in it. The other was just box stand. The other one was one of those proper AI, it was a phoenix rising from a kind of burning pile of Bitcoins or something like that. And I was like, mate, if we're gonna start saying to designers, you're on notice, and I was like, I don't know any agency that would take weeks to produce that. I don't know any
they're not going to produce.
They're not going to produce it at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, just pointed it out to him, and he was you know, and then he had all these other people you know, was it AI is here, move or die or whatever. It's just so. You know, there's this kind of and I'm all for, you know, you're not going to fight the progress of technology and quality, but let's not hold up that and say to good quality design that is good quality design, because it's crap. So that was my little LinkedIn beef.
Yeah, no, because I have similar opinions on. I love it. I love AI. I love what it's doing. We use it all the time for storyboards. It's amazing because we're hey, we want to. You know, the other week, one of the shots we wanted to do for a client was a young boy watching a plane go over his head and just sort of wishing that he could be on the plane. And we're like, how do we do? We just jumped on Runway.
Runway.
Jumped on, bang, here's our shot. Hey, this is what we're thinking. We put some text on the screen. This is what we're thinking. And they're like, yes, great. Go and do that. So then we got the shot. We did it all properly afterwards. But it was from a pre-visualization point of view, amazing tool rather than having, to sort of do an animatic or do something that's like way more intense. Amazing, huge cost saver.
Yeah.
But the line there, I think, is that like, don't draw the line in that the thing that we did to show the client, is this what you want? That's not the final piece.
Well, how long are you off from that being like
the final piece?
Yeah.
Well, I think the project sort of, the scope obviously changes, right? If that's the intent of the project and it serves the purpose, again, going back to the strategy, then it's fine. But I think people are just going to get so clued into
what it looks like,
what the realness of it, and the story that's attached to. I think that if the story's great, and even if it was AI, if the story's great, it's not going to matter that it's AI because the story is great and what it's trying to sell is great. But did you see, like, recently Optus they ran a full campaign through Facebook?
Yeah, and they got spanked for
that, because it was all just really
it looked awful.
It looked awful.
That's what I mean. That kind of stuff. I'm just like some like real freaky looking dude smiling, like it's just
and
glossed.
That's a decision of
glossy.
Yeah, and it's growing the weird smiles and the eyes are all weird.
Yeah, no.
And like that's a condition of somebody said like, we can run this campaign for 400% reduced cost by doing bang, bang, bang. And their decision would be based off that. They wouldn't be thinking about their user interaction with their thing. They would just think, oh, we've ran images on social media before. They go, great, let's do this, bang. And they wouldn't consider that overall strategy, which you need to do at every step. It can't just be you revisit it once every 6 months. And you go, okay, we're all on the same page. Let's go forward. It's just like, no, you need to revisit that. Who are you trying to talk to? Why are you trying to do this thing?
Yeah. How are you going to be different? What's your positioning? Yeah. I heard somebody describe it as, for the way that I use it in the work that I do, I heard somebody describe it as like salt in cooking, which I kind of quite liked. So, like in cooking, you use salt at the start of a recipe. So you might bake your fish in salt or like coat the meat in salt, whatever. Then the main part of the cooking and the ingredients and all that kind of stuff is you. And then at the end, you add like salt for like a bit of like flavor or whatever. So that's kind of how I use AI currently. I use it in the research stage. So essentially like kind of extended desktop research. Also, I use it for like gathering information. Also, I'll use it for like, I don't know, analyzing existing documents that I've got, interview transcripts, like putting in, like if you can and you are willing to, putting in survey responses or data that it can pull out to. So that's the kind of prep bit. Then I'll do all the strategy stuff and the writing stuff. And then at the end, when I'm writing, I'm heavily into it, like just like using it as this kind of sounding board, like short, simplify, shorter, another word, blah, 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 like just using it that way. So I'm like fully on board with using it. I just, from a content production perspective, at the moment, I'm turned off by anything that reeks or sniffs of it, because I just feel like it hasn't come with craft behind it. And maybe I'm different. I might be different from.
I think it'll get there. I think it'll get. It's already. You can see. I don't know if you've used like Midjourney before, but some of the stuff is unbelievable how good it can be. And like I did a little while ago, we recreated these little caricatures for an education course, and there wasn't really budget scope for it. And it was towards the end of the project, we're like, hey, it would be really great. You remember Clippy? The little,
we were
like, why don't we have these little like assisted learning things throughout? We'll have these little like notifications pop up as this is what you should be learning on, or, in this reflective piece, you should think this. And it was for like young entrepreneurs. And we're like, oh, great. Like, let's create some superheroes. So we created like a suite of like 12 superheroes. The prompt that it was like to create, and they were all in sort of like different positions, different head positions, different poses, all the rest. And then we sort of trimmed them out. We could just place them throughout the thing.
Really?
And it took, I don't know.
Well, animated? Like
no, not animated.
Oh, just like the little visuals.
Yeah. Just as a like, popping out of the top of a little like div box on a website. with a little, note or whatever. And it took us, I don't know, half a day to just sort of like pump them all out. I brought them into Photoshop, trimmed them all out. Here you go. Here are all the assets. Go ahead. And it was great. And it really just had that extra layer of flavor, like you're describing, the salt on top. It just gave that little bit of flavor at the end. That it was almost like, hey, there's a brand motif happening here. There's this superhero motif through this one course that now gives it a bit of pizzazz. It gives it a bit of something. And I come away from that being like, wow, that is so cool that we can do that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to because there wasn't any budget in the project to do it.
Yeah, you would have just got
it would have just said no. You would have just said no. But to be able to then quickly, mid-journey, bang, 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 here's the prompts. Referenced a couple of like comic book styles, things like this to sort of create this visual that we all landed on. Which I mean, there's a whole conversation in that too around like the rights to likeness. Stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So obviously, like when you created though, they would have been born from some plethora of visual style that it's then got from, and then who owns that visual style? Yeah, that's a bit of a minefield as well, isn't it? Yeah. Like, if you...
I'm not sure there's an answer to it either. Not without like really, really, really specific trademarks, right? Like this color combination or this like, I'm thinking like from a comic book point of view. Like how would you do in this scenario, the comic book superheroes? Like how would you trademark or how that would be so difficult.
Trademarks are like, I have a friend that works in trademarking and anytime I ask him a question, he always comes up with like a flaky ass answer. And he's always like, he says, trademarking is an art, not a science. And I'm like, should be a science, right?
Should be a science, right? Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, you could, because like a lot of stuff I do on trademarking is around naming, because I do a lot of naming.
Sure. Yep.
And so I'm like, can you use this name? And like, then you can have that. And he's like, maybe you might get away with that. It's like, well, surely at some point we should kind of know. But no, obviously, like it needs to go through the trademarking lawyers and all that stuff. So I would imagine that like, AI trademarking law firms are probably like popping up like rapid at the moment though. Like just a kind of breach of contract of trademark from AI. They're probably still waiting for the dust to settle. But
well, I've heard a lot of people talk about that like this is the closest thing to the .com boom since the .com boom, right? Is that like if you had a chance to start a business, now's probably the time to do it.
Yeah.
In like that's an extension of, right? Like you're maybe not using AI necessarily, but it's how AI is going to be used in the market. Which is why I guess I find myself asking these questions to you as a brand strategist in that like, I think Canva will, if they don't already have AI in it.
Oh, they do. Yeah. Canva Magic or something like that.
Yeah. That it's going to be the standard. It'll be industry standard to use AI in these basic sort of design whatevers. If you're creating some sort of new experimental sort of design concept, then obviously you can't. But I just find that even from a marketing point of view, I've been saying to people recently, I just think that there's going to be an increase in experiential. I think that they're like bringing people back to in front of, communities, standing in front of one another, going to live gigs. These sort of like actual live connection experiences are just going to get more and more important because you're going to get whatever you want at any time digitally.
Yeah.
That like you can't get that human connection digitally.
Yeah, it's a pendulum, isn't it? Yeah. Like I always feel like as soon as something swings one way too far or swings one way, it will kind of swing the next. I watched a really cool podcast called Death of the Follower by the guy that started Patreon, Jack something. And he was talking about how, the pendulum swung of like metas and like the social media groups, like kind of bringing in algorithms that meant that the creators that created content that originally used Facebooks and Instagrams and Twitter for their own communities had been kind of like obliterated and are no longer connected to their communities. So now what's happening is they're moving on to other platforms like Patreon and 4Wall and all of these other ones where they don't have to have the algorithm interrupting the connection that they have between them and their community. It's direct. And whether it's like, selling merch or doing gigs or sponsoring content. School is the other one, like that new kind of online one where it's just like, putting people into communities of stuff that they're interested in and getting them to pay for it. I feel like it's probably a response to the massive suck up of like mega money being taken from brands by the huge like big players and dropping down to a more like, what would you call it? Kind of like village kind of honest level.
Yep.
Like more of a kind of small community.
Yeah,
It could
find
be
your
like,
group.
Yeah, it could be like 500 people into, I don't know, card counting.
For sure.
Card counting could be the future.
No, I know what you mean. But you can see it in like the uptick in like Twitch and Kick. Those like live streaming platforms.
Yeah,
where-
although I reckon they're probably like, they would probably go. I mean, isn't Twitch owned by Amazon anyway? Yeah, so I think that what I'm talking about is a more kind of, what's the word? It's not like kind of.
No, but I mean, you can see it in like that is a public facing thing that they can get an aspect of that connection.
Yeah.
Like this is an easy, I can jump on the website and type in, XQC and I can watch him talk shit about whatever.
Yeah. It's a closer connection.
Yeah,
with
and you can
audience
type in chat and you can feel connected to it. I actually think that there's a huge market in sport for them to have that same interactivity and like let people jump on chat and send in their thoughts and like get them.
As in like with sports stars?
No, sport, like live sport. While it's
Live
happening.
sport.
Yeah, get somebody to get. It's not. There are sports that are doing it. I know like the EPL will stream on Twitch. I think the NFL are doing that as well. It gives you an aspect of connection that you otherwise don't have because you're sitting on your couch at home. You're not connected to this in any capacity. You're just watching it. If I can send in, oh, great tackle, I feel just slightly more connected to whatever it is.
Well, and like that's so then you'd have like a community of people that are kind of watching it. Like
And now you find, oh, you also like this team and you also find this thing.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
developing this community within this one game.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
do
like,
that at the moment, but it's just through like old school forums because it's just
It's
probably
exactly
stuff
the
on
same
there,
thing.
Like
Yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
watching my team and then I'll be on
Jump
the
on
forum,
it. Yeah,
like,
did you see
watching
that?
everybody bitch
Yeah.
about
Or
it.
on Reddit or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Oh, yeah, Reddit's another one. Like, yeah, I think and I think it's a pendulum swing. I think the same way as, as the plethora of AI generated content come in, people will respond to that and in whatever way. Could be that they go for a more lo-fi craft look that like doesn't look, but then can AI generate
Sure.
that. Whatever. They'll find the crack that is opened up by people's movement away from what will eventually become mainstream, and it will become the hopefully the subculture or the underculture that then will probably come up again. It's just like a cycle.
It'll keep changing, it'll keep moving, and the new cracks will form. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of interesting to it's kind of comforting to know that people hopefully refuse to kind of just put up with status quo, and that you do get resistance against it. And I feel like because it's robotic, the resistance will be pretty like harsh. Like I feel like maybe that crave for human connection. I feel the crave for human connection again. I've recently started doing like more in-person workshops because I just feel like maybe there's like online learning fatigue, remote learning fatigue.
Yeah.
And I feel like
post-COVID, definitely. Yeah.
And the idea of like getting in a room with people and being able to like sit with them during the breaks and just feel their presence in a room and like get them working with other people, like rather than have them as this little square on the learning. I think that I'm trying to push more into doing that because I feel like it's the pendulum swing, like, and if you can preempt where that pendulum is going to swing to, I reckon that's probably like how you get ahead, isn't it? It's not predicting the future, it's just predicting the swing.
Yeah, it's going to come back.
It's going to come back, or it's going to swing. Yeah, the other way. Happens in politics as well. Like swings.
For sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thanks, Richie. I'll call it there so you can make your way to wherever you need to go.
Good.
But is there any where people can find you? Is there anywhere specific that we'll link things below? But
I'm just on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to find me, LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm there. Mail at richiemeldrum.com if you want to email me, but just reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Del. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man.
Cheers, mate. Nice.